destroy lab, girlfriend. Me install window box for flowers.
We work hard. We play hard.
There are many dimensions to one's identity. Race, gender, and class are a few markers of identity that intersect to tell a unique story about an individual. Although the media recognizes the intricate identities for heterosexual characters, it is rarely acknowledged for characters who do not identify as straight. When mainstream media portrays lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer identities, it is often simplified to stereotypical characterization. The characters are reduced to one dimension and other aspects about them, such as race or gender, is thrown out the window. They are defined solely by their sexual orientation. Hollywood depends on exaggerating the gay, white, middle-class male archetype, being effeminate, flamboyant, and promiscuous, because that is how the director might understand members from the LGBTQ community to be. With these one-dimension, cliched representations, many stories fall through the crack. How do queer and Asian stories fit in? Where are the experiences of queer Asian women? What about the narratives of queer Asians living in poverty? Simply put, no room for more complex stories that explore class, gender, or race exists. In exploring queer Asian American experiences, we hope to find some insight on the kinds of stories that would otherwise be left out of mainstream media.
It's always an interesting question for me because I guess it all started when I entered college, and I mean I've always identified as heterosexual, I guess, because I dated boys and men, and so after a while, a couple years in college, I would just talk to my roommate and she'd be like, hey, do you ever think about women? And I'm like, yeah, I do, you know? So it's just kind of like, it was like a fun thing. I thought it was just like, you know, like, oh yeah, they attracted me, and it was, you know, a questioning phase, experimental phase, whatever you want to call it. But it wasn't until my junior year of college where I met someone, a woman, and we really hit it off, and it just was really natural for me. And when the natural part came, that's when I knew. That's when I knew, like, it just felt so much better. It felt right. It just made sense to me. Like, something clicked in my head, like the moment like I realized, you know.
Identifies as being gay, or I guess homosexual. I first realized that ever since I was 7. I know it's pretty young, but at first it didn't feel weird because I mean I wasn't really exposed to people who felt the same way, but at the same time, like, I didn't know it was wrong. I was really young. Like, being 7, I wasn't really exposed to a lot. I knew it was different because, like, growing up, like, I've never seen, like, a man hold a man's hands, or, like, you know, I was just really exposed to, like, opposite sex holding hands.
Well, the first family member I told was my sister, and it was really funny because I was like, hey, she's a freshman right now in college. She's three years younger than me. I was like, hey Trina, okay, so I have something to tell you. Don't get freaked out. Don't get mad. Don't be surprised. And I was like, okay, I have a girlfriend. And then she was just like, oh, I don't care, whatever. She was really chill about it, and it was like really surprising, but at the same time, like, you know, I guess a lot of folks these days, like this age and generation, like, are more open to the idea. So I was really glad that my sister was okay with it, and I was able to talk to her about it. And then,
like, later on, my mom told my dad that, oh yeah, like, he wants to go to college, like, this is good. And then my dad's like saying, like, I don't think he's gonna make it. I approached him and asked him, like, why do you think I'm not going to college? Whenever he talks in our native tongue, like, it's more serious. Basically saying that, like, I don't see any potential in you, or I don't see, like, a normal son in you. And that's why, like, I don't want to support you. I was disowned and kicked out at the age of 16 from my house. And that was, back in high school. I didn't really have anywhere to go. The way I identified really had an impact in the decision my dad made.
My mom and dad, I'm pretty sure I have no idea, but I think I'm trying to hint at them slowly. Just because I know that my parents, they've been through a lot, and because they're refugees from Vietnam. So I feel like a lot of their trauma has been built up, and I feel like my news, my sexual identity coming out to them will be another trauma in their life in a way, just because they've been through so much, and that they will see me not being the normative. They'll see that as a failure, or somewhere deep inside them they'll feel like they failed me. And no matter how much I know that they can reach the process of accepting me, I know that deep down it'll hurt them in some way. And I'm just trying to come to terms with that.
Actually, middle school, I remember my dad really saying if you don't like girls, I will hate you. Because your parents say that, you're thinking oh my gosh, is he really gonna hate me? I started to just kind of conceal that identity, that part of me, and kind of just ignored it and just focus more on school.
Even folks in the queer community, they call it gay until graduation. Categorize it as, the straight girl who turns queer and then experiments and realizes she likes dick or likes penis, It's it really invalidates, their experiences.
Narratives that try to show how different facets of identity negotiate each other tend to be narrowly focused. Screenplays that explore queer characters, such as Brokeback Mountain or HBO's The L Word, are inherently heterosexual in order to attract a large audience. These films do not address the issue of race and ethnicity in forming queer identity. There are, however, rare films that explore race, ethnicity, and sexuality. Queer Asian representation can be found in Saving Face and The Wedding Banquet. Although race and sexual orientation intersect to form a complex identity, they still do not define a person holistically. There are other dimensions such as class and immigration patterns that are not addressed. Overall, there is a lacking representation of queer Asians who are of lower socioeconomic status or from a first-generation immigrant or refugee background.
Even in media representation, the actors acting out the queer characters are straight, and they're very well-known faces. The L Word, which is a very popular primetime series where it's about lesbian women in LA, and of course 4/5 of them are paid straight actresses, and only a couple of them are actually queer. Representation that queer relationships are not recognized, because in the end the female always ends up with the male again, or the male always ends up with the female again. At the end, the resolution is that heterosexuality is always going to be the norm, even in a queer plot. Queer API folks in the media are very misrepresented. It's hard to even talk about it because there's so little representations. There's such an underrepresentation of queer APIs to begin with. So with what we already have, it's hard to work with that representation because it's already so small. So what can I generalize out of it? A lot of it, it's upper class. I've seen the movies Saving Face. One of the women is a doctor and the other person's a dancer. That's not the reality of it. That's Asian Americans who are far into the 3rd or 4th generation in America, and so that doesn't reflect my experiences. And so when I say sexuality is fluid for me, it means that I see my sexuality on a spectrum, and there's I guess really gay or really straight, and that's where society sees it at. But for me, I identify as anything in between that. So wherever it may be, I could be this one day, this the next day, this one year, and here the next year, and that's perfectly fine for me because I feel I don't want to be bound by labels or bound by categories, and fluidity is just water. You just go with the flow, whatever it feels right. Being queer and Asian is just 10 times harder you know, not to like devaluate anyone else's experiences, but like I just know a lot of folks who are closeted, you know, and a lot of queer and Asian folks who are closeted because they are scared about the consequences of their families, of their friends, and it has a lot to do with upbringing, like being Asian, and that's very particular, and I don't think that's recognized enough, and it's not represented enough in the media, and it's not talked about enough in like communities, and it's not addressed in like just any like social settings. So I feel like the conversations really need to happen more often so that people can feel like safe and feel comfortable to come out because they know that there are other queer APIs out there just like them. For example, in the API community, there's homophobia, but then in the queer community, there's racism. And so there's never a place where like you can navigate both spaces safely or like integratedly, you know? And just like experiences that we come from as Asian Americans, like what our parents have been through, what our families have been through, and how that manifests through our lives as second generation youth. I think that's very particular to the context of like the queer community and the API community. So being both is very challenging, and in a lot of ways, like we're very underrepresented. Like
but if you really had to think about our identities, being API and being queer, like I would say I would identify more with my culture versus my sexual orientation. But it depends on the person, like it's never the same for anyone else. It's very complex. The last message that, or one of the most important message that I said, even if you feel like you're alone, depressed, especially with all like the suicide that's going on or like attempted suicide that's going on, that people don't know or know about, that just know like it's not that you really need to find love from other people, but that you need to know that you need to learn how to love yourself more, because at the end of the day, who's gonna be there for you? Yourself.
So I think it's a lot of queer API folks are, I don't know, I'm getting emotional. I feel like a lot of folks aren't out just because like spaces or like a lot of like discourse doesn't exist for them to feel comfortable coming out, and it just kind of scares me like how many people aren't able to sit here and tell their story because like one, they're just scared like the parents might find out, or like two, like they're not out to themselves, or like three, they're just scared of being out to like, you know, the world. And like it's already hard for like the folks who identify as queer, but being queer and Asian is so much harder. It's just so much harder to navigate, you know.
One way of how APIs can be critical of how, you know, we're portrayed, especially with the complex identities that all Asian Americans have, that I feel all Asian Americans have, is using YouTube. One way to voice ourselves is where like any form of media can actually be obtained by other people.